Welcome to the VBAC Link podcast. We are a team of expert doulas trained in supporting VBAC, have had VBACs of our own, and work exclusively with VBAC women and their providers. We are here to provide detailed VBAC and cesarean prevention stories and facts in a simple, consolidated format. When we were moms preparing to VBAC, it was stories and information like we will be sharing in this podcast that helped fine-tune our intuition and build confidence in our birth preparation. We hope this does the same for you. To hear more about us and to hear our individual VBAC stories, be sure to check out episodes 1, 2, and 3. The purpose of this podcast is to educate and inform. It is not meant to replace advice from any other qualified medical professional. Today in episode 2, we are going to be sharing Meagan Heaton's journey from 2 C-sections to VBAC after 2 C-sections and becoming a doula in between all of that. Meagan, I heard that 8 providers told you that your pelvis was too small to ever vaginally birth a baby.
Yeah, they did actually. During my interview process leading up to my vaginal birth after the 2 cesareans, I took my op reports to 8 providers, and, well, more than 8, but 8 in particular told me that they definitely thought I could try to be back, but my pelvis was probably too small to birth a baby, just like my doctor said in my op report. Little did they know, they were wrong. I definitely did deliver vaginally, and it was an awesome moment. So with my first daughter, I didn't really know what to expect. My mom had had 2 previous C-sections, and I had asked my doctor if he thought that I would need cesareans just like my mom, and he said that there wasn't really any way to tell until I was in labor and things were happening. So as pregnancy continued and labor got closer, I just prepped on having a vaginal delivery and kind of really went into it unprepared. I didn't really take any courses or anything like that. I just knew that I wanted to have a baby. So when the day came, my water broke late at night around 11 p.m. And my doctor had always told me at all my visits, if your water breaks, I need you to come right in. And so I just did exactly what he said. I got my husband up, and we drove to the hospital. On the way to the hospital, I was definitely feeling something. It wasn't anything that I would say was painful or anything like that, but I was definitely feeling some cramping and some contractions, but things were really slow, and they were very, very short. When we got to the hospital, I was 1 centimeter dilated with nephrectomy, which I was really excited for because the day before that day at my doctor's visit, I hadn't dilated at all. So I was really excited, and they said that they wanted to get me hooked up and get the baby onto the monitor. So they put an IV in and started the fluids in that, and then told me that I needed to get in the bed because that would be the easiest place to get my baby's heart rate. And so I was in the bed, and those cramps continued, and they definitely started to get stronger and a little bit harder to get through, especially sitting in the bed. And as time passed, a couple hours later, I was 2 centimeters, which was really exciting. And then a couple hours later, I hadn't progressed as much as they had wanted, and so they told me that they wanted to start Pitocin. As soon as they started Pitocin, I could not believe it. Like, my contractions went from being okay to cope through to unbearable, and I found myself wanting to move, and they kept telling me that I couldn't, that I needed to stay where I was because that was the best place to get the baby's heart rate. And I thought I just was clinging onto the bed, and I turned to my husband and said, "Do something, help me." And he looked at me and said, "Epidural?" And the nurse was there, and she said, "We can get you an epidural." And I was just so uncomfortable, and I guess really just not prepared to cope through labor with Pitocin. And so I agreed to an epidural. Shortly after that, I got the epidural, and things were a lot more comfortable, and I kind of, there just became a lot more chill in the room. We kind of just hung out, and I was dozing in and out. My husband was dozing in and out. And a few hours later, they came in and checked me, and I was at a 3. So I had progressed a little bit, but they said that they were going to turn the Pitocin even more. And even though I couldn't feel it, I knew that my body, was working really hard with that Pitocin because I felt what that was like without the epidural. And needless to say, a few hours after that, I was still a 3, and my doctor told me that my body wasn't going into labor, and my pelvis was too small. He called it CPD, and he said that we needed to go to the OR. Trusting my doctor and not really knowing any better, my husband and I both agreed to go down to the OR. I was really sad, and I knew I didn't really want a C-section, but I just trusted my provider and didn't know any different. So we went down to the OR and had the cesarean. My daughter was kind of placed over the curtain, and I saw her for a second, and then her and my husband were gone, and I got to hear all about the doctor and the assistant's vacation that they recently took, and I just wanted to know where my daughter was and how she was doing. And finally, about 15 minutes later, they brought her over. We took a quick picture, and then my husband and her left, and then I went into recovery into this dark room by myself, swollen and shaking, and just really wanting my daughter. And finally, when they brought her in, we started nursing, and things were okay, but I was scared. I was unsure how I was feeling and if how I was feeling was normal, but just kind of went with it. Right after we got out of the hospital, I had been sharing my birth story with friends and family, and someone said, "Oh, well, you could VBAC next time." And I said, "VBAC?" And a friend said, "Yeah, that's a vaginal birth after cesarean." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't know you could do that." And she said, "Oh, yeah, you can absolutely do that." So I started my research right off the get-go. I wasn't even thinking of getting pregnant anytime soon. I mean, I just had my daughter, and started finding that, wow, yeah, I could VBAC, and that the chances were great. And there were so many awesome stories out there of these women having vaginal births after cesarean. So I told my husband, that's what I want to do next time. Whenever we get pregnant, I just want to go into it with a mindset of having a VBAC. So a couple years later, when we got pregnant, I started my journey of wanting to VBAC. So I started learning about some things to help increase my chances to VBAC. And I honestly didn't do everything. I read a lot of blogs and heard a lot of stories from friends and learned things like taking dates and stuff like that. But I learned a lot of things like chiropractic care and special herbs to take, and really paying attention to your diet. And those were things that I wasn't too sure about, and so I actually ended up not doing chiropractic care. I did watch my diet, and I was a lot more active this time, but I didn't do everything. So when the time came and my water broke, again, just like it did the previous time, my husband was actually out of town, which most people would think, that's scary, your husband's out of town. But I knew that my body had some time, and I was kind of relieved because I knew that that would give me lots of time to just hang out at home while he was working on getting back. So while he was working on coming home, I just kind of did my thing. I hung out with my cousin, who was super excited for me and wanted me to be back just as bad as I did. And we hung out, and contractions weren't really starting. They were here and there, maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds long. So I did some things like pumping, and that definitely increased it, but they just weren't really coming consistently. Hours later, when my husband got home, things were still so slow, and he was a little nervous, and so was my mom, and everyone was like, well, you need to go to the hospital. They might not have room for you when it's time. And so I called the hospital, and they said that they had a room, and I told them that my water had broken, and they said, oh, you need to come in. But I knew I was GBS negative, so I wasn't in any rush, but had some pressure at home. So after a couple hours after that, we went into the hospital. We got my daughter, and we drove there, and things were still so calm, and they put me in the hospital gown and, of course, wanted to get me hooked up to everything, and so they did. And there was one thing I wanted to make sure that I did not want to be in that bed, so I told the nurse, please don't make me get into the bed. I just want to be out, and I want to move around. And she said, oh, that's totally fine. And I asked for a supportive nurse that was VBAC friendly and natural minded because I really wanted to go unmedicated this time. And my nurse was just incredible. Once things kind of wound down and my mom took my daughter home, Rick, my husband, just fell asleep because all the hype of getting here, I think, just took a lot out of him. So he ended up falling asleep, and the nurse and I just chatted all about my previous C-section and all the things I wanted to do this time. And she said, oh, my gosh, she's like, I just love it. I'm so excited for you. And she'd help me with counter pressure when the contractions would come. And what I found out is she was actually a doula before she became a labor and delivery nurse. And a doula is something that I found out about right before my husband left for his work trip. And I asked my husband if we could get a doula, but he was not really comfortable with the idea of it. And so I said that was fine, and we decided not to get a doula. But I thought that was so exciting that she was a doula. So she talked to me all about doula work and why she became a doula and everything. And there was just some sort of excitement inside me that was like, oh my gosh, a doula sounds so awesome. But her shift ended at 7, and she gave me the biggest hug and just told me good luck and that she believed in me. And about an hour after that, the nurse came back in and said, your body's just not going into labor. It doesn't know how. And that was really frustrating for me because I had been built up by this cute nurse that I had, and she gave me so much hope. And then hearing that my body didn't know how to go into labor, I actually asked for Pitocin and was told that I was not going to be allowed to have Pitocin because of my previous cesarean. And I asked for anything, if there was anything I could get. And her and my doctor discussed things and decided that they were not going to be able to give me anything to help my body progress a little bit. And the time clock that was running low on time. And so my doctor came in and told me, interestingly enough, same doctor told me, I think you might have been able to get a baby out this time, but your body just didn't go into labor, which I thought was very interesting because the first time he told me I couldn't get a baby through my pelvis, I had CPD, and then failure to progress. But I asked for another hour, and at that point, I think just my body and my emotions just kind of shut things down, and contractions just stopped altogether. And so after talking with my husband, he was nervous. The doctor had brought up infection after 18 hours, and we agreed to walk down to the OR for the second time and have a repeat cesarean. It was a little different this time. My husband remembered that I said that I wanted to watch my birth because I wanted to watch it vaginally, and he asked for a mirror, which I loved that he asked that and remembered that. So I got to watch my cesarean, which was very fascinating, and it was awesome for me because I felt like I got to be a part of it. And then he asked for music to be turned on and for the doctors to be talking to me versus to each other, which really changed my experience having that second cesarean because I really felt a part of the whole thing. Another awesome thing that I got to do was have my daughter placed on my chest, which was something I didn't get with my first baby, and that meant a lot to me. So even though it was a repeat cesarean, it was a more of a healing experience from the first time. But I still was just left wondering, is my body really not capable of going into labor? Is my pelvis really that small to not get a baby down through the birth canal? So right out of the OR, I was in recovery in the dark room, nursing my baby, enjoying that moment with her, and I just wanted to Google how to become a doula. Out of all things to be thinking of right then, I decided to become, Google how to become a doula. And as I was reading, I just was like, wow, like, this is exactly what I want to do. And I want to be just like that nurse that helped me through that time, that first part of my labor, who helped me feel motivated and empowered and encouraged me through this time. And so I put the phone away and we went back into the other room, and, family came and my daughter came to meet her baby sister. And once all of the hype kind of wound down, I just started Googling, how to become a doula classes in Salt Lake City, and registered for my class right away. So that's kind of where my doula journey started, is right after my second cesarean. We got home and, I was looking forward to my class that was starting in a couple months, and I kept researching more, especially about VBAC, because I really wanted to know, now that I've had two, if I have another baby, do I have to have another cesarean? And, all research pointed to, no, you still don't have to have another cesarean. And things are still very safe and odds are still very great. And so that really made me excited. And then starting my doula career, of course, being in the world, the doula world, I learned more and more about VBAC and the ICANN network here. And so I started attending meetings there and was just super excited to become pregnant again. And this time being a doula and I was going to get a doula. I knew that. I knew I was going to do chiropractic care. So when it came time to get pregnant again, I started all of that really early on, which was different than I did the last time. I still watched my diet, and I would drink a lot, and I was very active, but I started chiropractic care at 18 weeks with my third. I started finding out who I wanted to be a doula right off the get-go. And being a doula, it was really hard because we have such a great doula community, but I found some awesome doulas who just seriously I could never thank for all of their help. But I wanted to make sure, number one, that I had a good provider. And I knew that was maybe going to be a little bit trickier for, after having two cesareans for me. So I went to the hospital and I signed the paper to get my op reports and started reading over them myself. And it did say that I had CPD and that I had failure to progress. And it was really frustrating because I just knew. I knew that my body could go into labor, and I was confident that I could push the baby out. So I started going to doctor after doctor. I, looked around in the area and wanted to know, hey, who's VBAC friendly? VBAC after two cesarean friendly. And I went from doctor to doctor, and I knew some kind of red flags. I didn't want anyone to tell me I could try. I wanted someone to tell me I could do it. And maybe that was setting someone up. I don't know. But that was something I wanted to hear, was they believed in me that I could do it. And so I ended up going to 12 doctors, but 8 out of the 12 doctors told me, well, you could try, but your doctor's probably right. Your pelvis is probably too small, and you wouldn't be able to birth a baby out of your pelvis, through that birth canal. And I was baffled. I could not believe that. I just knew I could. So after doctor after doctor after doctor, I found an incredible doctor here in Salt Lake City, Utah. For any moms in Salt Lake City, you need to check out Sean Edmonds at St. Mark's. He is awesome. I went into his office and I took my op report, and he looked at me and he said, I'm not seeing anything here that tells me you can't. And I wasn't there, but it just sounds like you didn't have a chance. You weren't given time. You needed time. And he told me, yeah, you can do this. Like, I really think you can do this. And it changed my world once I found him. My entire self, really. I believed in myself even more than I thought I believed in myself. And so I was excited, and I started treating with him, and I knew, like, okay, I can do this. This VBAC is going to happen. And halfway through my pregnancy, crazy enough, as a doula, I worked with this midwife on Christmas Eve, and I just watched her birth this baby. And she blew me away. She absolutely blew me away. And I just said, hey, would you consider taking a mom after previous C-sections? And she said, yeah, I would. And she said, I'd have to see the op reports and we'd have to go over things. And I said, I'm actually talking about me. Is there any way I could come meet with you? And she said, yeah, bring it up and let's talk about it. So I went into her office one day, which was completely deviating from my normal plan of, having birth in the hospital with this wonderful OB that I had. And we sat down and we looked at my records, and she also said, you just weren't given time. You can do this. I believe you can do this. And something in my gut just said, change providers, go this route. She wasn't in the hospital, which is kind of nerve-wracking. She was at a birth center, and she didn't have the same resources as the doctor in the hospital did. She didn't have the OR right there, but she had an OB backup, and I knew that I had Dr. Edmonds as well. And so I changed care halfway through my pregnancy, which was exciting and nerve-wracking all at the same time. And from the moment I started with her care, that encouragement and confidence just continued to build. Every single time I walked in there, she gave me a hug and said, how are you feeling today? And I said, I'm feeling so good. I just always looked forward to seeing her. When the day came to me having a baby, I was past due, and I was completely okay with that. And I started to lose mucus plug, and so I knew the day was coming. And I wrote her and told her that things were happening, and she said, okay, we'll hopefully see you soon. And the next day, my water broke again, and that was really hard for me. It was really hard for me because I had done a lot to try and avoid having membranes rupture. I did all the things to strengthen membranes, and my membranes ruptured again. And so for me, it was a little bit of a trigger because I doubted myself, because I knew that that's what happened the last time, 2 times, and I ended up in the OR. And so I had to really work hard to get around that and say, no, yes, your water broke, but you're going to be allowed time, and you've got great care, and it's going to be okay, and you've got a good team. So after hours and hours, I agreed to meet with my midwife to kind of see where things were going. And we met up, and she said, well, you've still got some work to do, but let's try a Foley bulb and Foley catheter and see if that helps. And so we did that, and I went home, and it immediately popped, and I was so sad. And I just figured, well, I'm meant to do this on my own. This is my journey. Here we go. And so I continued, and the next morning, things really changed and picked up. And so we met back at the birth center, and I was 4 centimeters, which was something I had never gotten past. I'd never gotten past 3 centimeters, so that was really exciting. And my baby was really, really low, which I was feeling during that labor. And she said, okay, let's go upstairs and let's have a baby. And I was just so excited, and my doulas were excited. So we just went up, and we kept working on his position. And eventually I just felt this obscene amount of pressure, and my midwife checked me, and she said, okay, and looked at me, and she said, just a second, and she walked over, and she got a birthing stool, and she set it all up and said, let's come over here and have a baby. And I just remember I looked at my doula, and I said, what is happening? And I'm crying, and she said, I think you're going to have a baby right now. And I just was in shock. I couldn't believe that was happening. I couldn't believe it. But I knew that I had some work to do, because I knew I had to push this baby out. So I went over there, and my husband got set up, and he was behind me, and he was holding me, and he was telling me I could do it. And I looked around, and my doulas were looking at me smiling, and my midwife was looking at me. And I started pushing, and she said, oh my gosh, like, he's coming. And I saw all the excitement on all my doulas' faces, and she said, okay, this next time I want you to just push just a little bit, don't push too hard. And in my head, I'm thinking, wait, like, I've attended births, and that's what they say at the end. And I was just like, okay. And she's like, he's right here. You can feel him. And so I reached down, and I felt him. And the next push, I pushed just like she said. And she looked up at me and said, Meagan, grab your baby. And I reached down and I grabbed his head and kind of slid down into where his shoulders were where I could grab him. I pulled him up on my chest and I just yelled, "You guys, I did it. I actually did it." And my husband was sobbing in my ear and just so proud and excited. And my little boy was just looking up and kind of crying a little bit, but mainly just reaching up. And, it was just the most beautiful moment. So that is my VBAC story. I delivered a baby out vaginally in 2 pushes after 8 doctors told me I would never, they said that my chances are very slim of getting a baby out of my pelvis because I had CPD.
Wow, Meagan, thanks for sharing that story. I learn something new every single time you tell it, and I never get tired of it. For our listeners, did you know we have a blog all about VBAC after 2 or more C-sections? You can find it by going to bit.ly/VBA2C fact. That's bit.ly/VBA2C FACT. There's so much good information there. Thanks again, Meagan. I love hearing your story. And for everybody else, happy VBAC.
Thank you so much, Julie. I'm so excited to start this journey with you guys and share all of these stories for moms all around. We are always looking for more inspiring stories. To share your story or possibly be on one of our podcasts, post on social media with the hashtag #WeVBAC and tag @TheVBAC link or contact us from our website.
Be sure to rate us and share and leave your reviews. We are excited to hear what you think. For families local to Utah, be sure to check out our website, utahvbaclink.com, for more information on our VBAC childbirth classes and doula services. Thank you so much for listening. We are excited for you to begin your journey with us.